Why do you have to be proud of every Swedish band if you're Swedish? I'm not proud of Rolf Harris. I'm Australian.
Eavesdroppin.
Michelle, it's me, Geordie. Hi.
Hi, Geordie. Geordie, hi.
Geordie, hi. Michelle,
Geordie, hi.
Honey, hi.
Geordie, hi, ho.
Hey, hi. Silver Loney.
Geordie, hey. Geordie, hey, what the hell
It has
is
gone
going
wrong
on?
already. Welcome, eavesdroppers. If you're a regular eavesdropper, that little intro won't surprise you.
No, it will not, because it's the hellos. The hi-ho hellos.
You got me at hello, Michelle.
Oh, you've always got me at hello. Welcome, eavesdroppers.
We're eavesdropping.
And we're saying hello to you. You've got us at hello.
Because you're an eavesdropper. You've got us at hello, unfortunately for you.
This is Eavesdroppin, the comedy podcast. You're an eavesdropper. Thanks for listening.
Basically, two dafties chit-chatting and welcoming you into our chit-chatting stupid circle for some nonsense. How about that? Do you fancy it? Come on. Let's go.
Because I would say, Geordie, you're as daft as a brush.
I'm as daft as a brush. I am as daft as a brush, actually. Michelle, you're as daft as a lead pipe cleaner.
Fucking hell, you just made that up.
I did make it up. You're right. It's a comedy podcast. And lucky old you, we also talk about some really dark and scary things. Sometimes it's supernatural. It's real life. It's
True crime. True crime. It's all those things.
all those things and more.
It is. And if you listened a couple of episodes back, we did a scary episode on Into the Woods. People missing in the woods. And out of nowhere, I say out of nowhere. Mispers. Yes, mispers. Vanished without a trace. Out of nowhere, I got an alert for a news story, which I'm actually just going to read this out. Missing fugitive father and 3 kids are spotted alive and well and living in the wilderness 3 years after they vanished without a trace.
What? That's insane.
New Zealand. So basically this guy, Tom Phillips, grabbed his daughter Jada, his son Maverick and daughter Amber. Grabbed them and disappeared from the New Zealand town of Maricopa in December 2021. So this is like tail end of COVID, I would say.
Yeah.
Apparently there have been sightings of them reported to the police, but most of them were unverified, but mainly only of the dad, none of the kids. But now there's a video of these 3 with backpacks on, just like hiking across the beautiful kind of rugged New Zealand terrain. And basically they think this dude just picked up his panties and went.
And left. Yes.
But the kids are alive, so they're like, okay,
great.
Great.
As per my story, anything could go wrong, especially if you're ill-prepared.
Exactly. So it's amazing that they've survived 3 years in the wilderness.
I think that my husband could survive in the wilderness. Yeah, he went and picked up a deer a couple of weeks ago, Michelle. You were here for that.
Yes.
Yeah. You actually saw it being eaten as well because you're vegetarian. You didn't partake.
No, I did not. I saw the blood running on the plate because it was beautifully done, rare, bloody, all that. Yep, saw it.
The blood running on the plate. Why did you have to say that? It's so grotesque.
It's game meat. And it was...
Meat, yes.
Bloody, which was, it made it taste...
Almost
tasty. But you did say he picked up a deer. It did sound like, he either the deer was hitchhiking or the deer was at a bar and he got picked up.
Well, he's now picked up a deer skin. He's made best friends with the hunter. And it got me thinking, actually, about hunters. And now he's also got our Christmas dinner all wrapped up. He went and bought some Canada goose from this man. And he even threw a few legs in for free. So looks like that's what we're having for Christmas. That's sorted.
Okay.
Except for the vegetarians, of which there are about 3 people coming who are vegetarians. Not you, Michelle.
No, not me. Although I would love to come. I just didn't get an invite. Couldn't come anyway.
I would invite you. It's an open invitation. You know that.
I know. I do know. Okay, so you've got Canada goose legs.
Yep.
And some deer.
Yep.
Wonderful. Your Christmas is absolutely done. I'm going to be having probably a piece of pumpkin.
Like a little Wellington. A nut roast Wellington, I think.
Yeah, maybe. If I make it
something
myself.
wrapped in pastry.
No, it'll be goddamn tasty. That's what it'll be.
Hey, eavesdroppers, are you into reality TV? If so, have you watched Married at First Sight UK Season 9? If so, have you checked out our Side Hustle? It's a TV talking about podcast. What would you say that is, Michelle? That's a bit clunky, what I just said there.
Talking about telly. That's what we're doing.
Talking about telly. A TV review podcast. I'm making it sound quite highbrow now. It's not that either. It's just us chatting about the current series of Married at First Sight UK, aka Maths Arc.
And, you know, we're doing the maths. We are. And if you're into it, it's called show dumping because...
No G.
We're dumping a lot of opinions about shows. And Maths UK is the first one. It's on all the good platforms, Spotify, Apple, you know, wherever you want to find it, you'll find it.
We have an Instagram, so if you want to get in touch like you do with the Eavesdroppin, just go and find what is it called again? Show dumping _ same as our Eavesdroppin _ I think that's what I did. I can't remember.
And it's show dumping, no G.
No G. Hey, Michelle gets really harsh. She is quite harsh, I have to say. She is rough on those poor bastards who signed up to be on TV.
The last episode I did walk away from the recording thinking, I sound like the worst bitch of them all. You know, I was harsh on everyone, but...
You let rip, Michelle. You let rip.
I did let rip because they deserved it. Oh, they're getting worse by the week. But we love it.
We do love it. Have you watched any other TV by any chance?
No. However, I do have a telly rec from Jen.
Oh, hi, Jen. Back on her feet.
Back on the telly. And she watched a show called Nobody Wants This.
I wish that Jen was on the telly, by the way. It's called Nobody Wants This. Okay, what's that about?
So it is a Jewish rom-com between a sex podcaster and a rabbi. Mum says it's good, and she said Adam Brody is great, but she didn't think Kristen Bell was much chop.
Okay.
And when I looked it up on IMDb, Willa from Succession is in it.
Willa. Oh, she's the girlfriend of the oldest brother.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yes, in Succession. She's the
yes.
girlfriend / paid sex worker.
Yeah.
I watched the trailer for this Nobody Wants This because eavesdropper Zoe and Cara, they both recommended this also. So, and I watched the trailer and it looked good. It looked like a feel-good watch. I'm going to give it a go.
Well, I haven't time because I haven't caught up with my maths research at the moment yet, but I did watch because I'm in a house full of guys at the moment. I've got Tim the Magic Music Man here and my husband. So my husband and I started watching series 4 of Slow Horses, and I can tell you it's everything I expected. I love it so much. Tim the Magic Music Man, on the other hand, is a few seasons behind, so I couldn't watch it with him last night. So instead, we went back to watch the 80s version. BBC, it's on the BBC iPlayer if you're in the UK. Smiley's People. It's a very different way of telling a story. Spy thriller, John le Carré. It's very, very cool. George Smiley is the ubiquitous spy who John le Carré has lots of books written about him. And in fact, Gary Oldman played him in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy in that film not very long ago when he was a bit more handsome and not so fat and farty.
Okay.
As he is as Jackson Lamb in Slow Horses. If you're a Slow Horses fan, you'll know what I mean.
I used to find him quite hot.
He is hot.
Even as Jackson Lamb?
No, you need to wash, but yeah.
Because I just feel like he's got
hot.
kebab down his front all the time.
He does, yeah.
And for any Australians, he is a little bit barge ass.
What's a barge ass?
Barge ass.
Barge ass.
Comedy spoof on a TV show from the 80s. And I will put a link to that in the show notes. And if you're on Patreon, and you should be, there's been some shit up there. Picture of you.
Picture of me?
A very handsome young TV star.
Oh, you mean Anthony Tamayaha? Yes, Antonio Tamayaha.
Yes.
I call him Anthony. Yes. Okay, that's a bad picture of me just saying. I'm singing. Because that's all we did. We used to sit and play guitar and sing our little hearts out.
Well, I thought it was a lovely pic, and that is on the Patreon. So are all the links and some good stuff. So get on it.
Speaking of links, I've got a patron who has gotten in touch, Charlene, who said thanks for her mum Margaret's shout out. Here's another one, Margaret, if you're still with us. She was entertained by us talking about the changing rooms. We were talking about changing rooms recently in apart hotels. And she sent a fabulous clip to the Eavesdroppin Instagram page of Linda Barker when she put some flimsy shelves up. I will pass that on to you, Michelle. You can pop that on the Patreon.
Fantastic.
If you want to be in the Patreon party, you can, you know, but you just have to pay an admission fee.
Pop a little coin in the slot.
Pop it in the slot.
Pop it like it's hot.
And Bob's your uncle. You're in.
Exactly.
Pop it like you... And then you get access to all this interesting info as well. There's always tele-recommendations. It's your go-to. And what else is there? Videos and bits of shit, basically. All the links for every episode if you want to know more and can't be bothered to type something into Google. Michelle's done it for you.
I have. And you can lose yourself in a wormhole of stuff if you're interested in the episode. Patreon. Get on it.
If you are interested in being lost in another wormhole right now, guys, it's a real-life true crime episode today from my side, at least, because I'm going to tell you about something that happened on July the 1st, 2002. Bashkirian Airlines, and I didn't practice saying that. I hope I've said it right.
Say it again.
Bashkirian Airlines.
Okay, never heard of it.
En route from Moscow to Barcelona, carrying many children of high-ranking officials of the Republic of Bashkortostan. Never heard of that either.
That sounds
I know, it sounds like I've made it up. Yeah. You know what? My daughter is watching Lost at the moment, and I kind of feel like this story is very lost.
Okay, because it also sounds like the made-up republic of a cult.
Yes, it does sound a bit like that, but it's real. Bashkortostan, it's a semi-autonomous region in the Russian Federation. Okay. So it's in that area. So they're all Russian school children. They're heading to Catalonia on a school trip. It was organised by the UNESCO committee. The pilots on the service were really experienced pilots.
Yep.
There was 3 of them, 1 flight navigator, a flight engineer. The airline's chief pilot was evaluating the flight's captain, which is why there were so many in the cockpit at the time. So you'd think you'd be safe as houses, right? But on the same night, a second aircraft operated by DHL International, now you know what that is because everybody gets parcels from DHL. It's a cargo service. That was flying between Bahrain and Brussels via Bergamo, Italy. The DHL flight was also operated by experienced crew, and they had logged almost 20,000 flight hours, so they also knew what they were fucking doing.
And might I say, 2002...
Might you?
Might I say, 2002, it's post 9/11.
Yes.
So no one's allowed in a fucking cockpit at this point.
Unless they are supposed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's all good. They're allowed.
Good. All right.
Yeah. No one's there that shouldn't be. What I'm trying to set up here, Michelle, is that everybody was very good at their jobs,
yes,
very experienced and allowed in there. But these 2 planes still crashed into each other above the town of Überlingen in Germany, resulting in the deaths of everybody aboard, totaling 71 people. How could this happen? If you look up right now, Michelle, you'll see so many planes in the sky. It's a surprise that it doesn't happen more often. But of course, there is a precise logic to the way our airways are being run, and that is down to the air traffic controller.
Really? I'm looking up now. I can see outside my window. There's 2.
Is there?
Yes. And they're not smashing into each other.
No, they don't. They look like they're about to sometimes, but they don't. So on that night, there was only one person working, and he was alone in the air traffic control room in Zurich, Michelle, near where you sometimes are, simultaneously managing 2 stations. This situation contributed to the collision as confusion over prompts from the aircraft's traffic collision avoidance systems also played a role. So on the planes, there's these traffic collision avoidance systems, like I just said.
Yep.
They will also guide you in lieu of an adequate air traffic controller or just as an extra layer belt and braces.
Of protection, yeah.
Peter Nielsen was the controller at ACC Zurich, and he had jurisdiction over the German town of Überlingen, where the planes were positioned at the time. This guy was overworked, and he was the only controller on duty, and he had to manage 2 workstations. I mean, this is a violation of the rules, and it ultimately played a key role in the planes crashing into each other.
It's very un-Swiss to not play by the rules.
I hear you. What's going on here? He was only alerted to the problem shortly before the crash occurred as well. He had all the modern technology necessary to do his job, but maintenance work had temporarily disabled the collision warning system and some of his telephone lines.
How is that even possible?
Maintenance work has got to go on at some point. You can't just say no planes now because we need to just do some maintenance on the telephone lines. But when he noticed this imminent collision around 23:34 local time, he instructed the Russian plane with the kids on it to descend to avoid hitting the cargo plane. And if all went well, this action would have kept the two aircrafts at a suitable altitude distance from each other despite their paths crossing over the south of Germany simultaneously, as I would say. An American might say simultaneously. I don't know why I just said that. The Russian crew's traffic collision avoidance system, and there is an acronym for that. I can't remember what it is.
Okay.
TCAS, there you go. Traffic Collision Avoidance System, had directed them to ascend despite Nielsen's guidance. They chose to listen to that.
Oh, chose to ascend rather than descend.
Ascend. The Russian people plane,
Yes.
they listened to that rather than to the air traffic
human
controller.
Yes.
Yes. And at the same time, the cargo's plane traffic avoidance system had also recommended that the DHL crew descend to prevent a collision. So they're speaking the same language. However, due to all the confusion between the two sets of instructions, both aircraft descended.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So the controller gave a 44-second warning to the Russian passenger jet that it was too close to the cargo aircraft. If the pilots had just followed the warnings issued by their own TCAS, the traffic control, blah, blah, they might have been able to save their aircraft. Tragically, the Russian plane's experienced captain, who was 52-year-old Alexander Gross, followed Nielsen's instructions, meaning his aircraft was sliced in two as the DHL plane's tail fin cut through its fuselage.
Fuselage. Yes.
Fuselage with wreckage and bodies scattered over a wide area.
Fucking hell.
But it's amazing no one on the ground was killed, Michelle, because it was over a town. It's like Lockerbie.
Right. So this must have been maybe on the outskirts of the town or something.
No.
Really? Holy shit.
After the incident, the German government, Switzerland, which had jurisdiction over the airspace, Russia, where the Bashkirian Airlines aircraft was registered, and Bahrain, where the DHL Middle East aircraft was registered, all conducted a completely thorough investigation, and they all agreed that miscommunication was a major factor in the crash. This ultimately called for additional training for both pilots and air traffic controllers, which puts my mind at rest, to prevent such catastrophes from occurring in the future. They did, however, disagree on where to put the blame, because obviously you need to blame someone, right?
That's it. But I actually feel like that poor traffic controller in Switzerland, it's kind of not his fault because he said descend. Surely
they descended, but they both descended.
Exactly.
Yeah. So some of that info may have been confusing, and I'm sorry for that. I did get my information from an aviation magazine and newspaper reports, which you will link up to if you're confused about some of my info. Apologies. So Bahrain thought that the private company that hired the controller, Nielsen, should have been responsible because they ultimately provided these bad conditions that led him to being overworked. And I would agree with that.
Okay, but I feel like he gave a very clear instruction, and that was for one plane to descend.
But they both descended.
Yes, but he gave an instruction to one, so the other one shouldn't have descended. The other one should have just continued.
They listened to their TCAS, and that may be because he was taking too long to respond, because he was talking to the other plane. There's just one of him.
Right. Okay. I can see that.
That's what I mean. So they may have thought, where's this guy? What are we supposed to do? There's 44 seconds. Just do this. Panic, you know?
Yeah.
Because they weren't being guided as they should have been.
Okay.
Switzerland and Russia disagreed on whether the Russian pilots were to blame due to ignoring Nielsen's repeated requests to ascend. The air traffic controller, Nielsen, who worked for the firm Sky Guide, was never publicly named. He lived in Switzerland for 5 years when the crash occurred, but he's Danish.
Right. I feel like he's not to blame. He told one to descend, one to ascend. They didn't listen. How can he be to blame?
Sadly, some people did blame him, and 2 years later, in February 2004, a man knocked on the door of Peter Nielsen's family home in a suburb near Zurich Airport. And after a brief conversation, this man plunged a 5.5-inch knife into 36-year-old Nielsen's stomach in front of his wife, with the couple's 3 children believed to be at home at the time, and Peter Nielsen died in his wife's arms.
Oh, my
The attacker
God.
fled on foot.
That is absolutely horrific.
Isn't it? When people discovered it was the man some held responsible for the deaths of those on board the planes in the Überlingen collision, they were shocked.
Yeah.
One lady, Yulia Fedotova, who lost her daughter Sofia, aged 15, said, "We had hoped that he would stand before a court and, if they decided as much, he would be punished. We are shocked by the news, of course, and among the relatives of the victims I have spoken to, we feel sorrow for his wife and children who now have to live without a husband and father."
That's rough.
So when investigators finally tracked down the guy who did the stabbing, Vitaly Koloyev, he claimed to have no memory of the attack. But it was revealed that Koloyev had lost his entire family on board the Russian plane that day. He'd been working in Barcelona at the time, and he stayed on so his wife and 2 kids, aged 10 and 4, could meet him on a holiday, but they never arrived.
Oh.
When Koloyev heard the news of the crash, he went straight to the crash site in Überlingen to search for his family.
Oh, my God.
This is horrific, Michelle. He found the body of his 4-year-old daughter, Diana, still intact after trees broke her fall 2 miles from the main plane wreckage in the town of Überlingen.
Oh, God.
His wife, Svetlana, 44, had landed in a cornfield, and his son, aged 10, was in front of a bus shelter. Both had fallen 36,000 feet.
Oh, my God.
Bodies falling from the sky.
Why would you want to find that? To subject your eyes and your...
He needed to help. He needed to be there. I mean, this guy is driven.
Yep.
Make no doubt about it. It was a miracle, like I said, that no one had been hurt or killed on the ground. People were falling
Shocking.
at high velocity.
Yep.
After this, and he found his children and his wife, Koloyev had attempted to arrange a meeting with the air traffic controller legally. So he went about trying to find out his name and his location, but he got no response and didn't get anywhere. He also turned down an offer of £130,000 in compensation. Subsequently, he hired a private detective to locate Nielsen because he didn't want the money. He wanted justice.
He wanted revenge, I would say.
Eventually, Koloyev was sentenced to 8 years in a Swiss prison, but served only 3 years after it was found that his mental trauma from the case had not been taken properly into account. And Koloyev's story, including his time in jail for murder, has become the subject of several films, including one starring Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2017 called Aftermath. Or Aftermath.
Never heard of it. It was probably after the peak of Arnie's career.
Is he in trouble for feeling people's skirts or lifting their skirts?
I don't know. He could be. Well, let's just say I'm sure this movie went straight to Betamax.
Yes. After Koloyev's release from prison in 2007, he returned to Ossetia, where he's from, to a hero's welcome.
Oh.
And it was Ossetia. And he was made Deputy Minister of Construction in his region. He remarried and had twins, a boy and a girl, and he was 62 and said at the time, "Life has turned out so that I have children once more and I have meaning in my life again." He never recovered from the grief. For a year after the accident, he stood almost constantly at the graves of his family and built a shrine to them in his home. And that's what propelled him to track down Nielsen's address, initially to demand an apology, Michelle. It's all he wanted.
Well, he obviously had a knife with him. So he did have another agenda, I would say.
Yes, it is that. What he said was, "I protected the honor of my children and the memory of my children. Nielsen was nobody to me. He was an idiot, and that's why he paid for it with his life. If he'd been smarter, it would have been like this. If he'd invited me into the house, the conversation would have happened in softer tones and the tragedy might not have happened." There was such arrogance and contempt in his eyes. The film Aftermath doesn't show this. Killing him didn't make me feel any better.
Well, this is what I was going to say. First of all, we only have his word that this guy was arrogant.
Yeah, who's to say that he wasn't going to come inside and kill his wife and kids?
Exactly.
In retaliation.
Second of all, he has absolutely no evidence that this guy was responsible.
Well, not only that, he didn't do it on purpose.
Of course not. And I stand by saying he told one to ascend, one to descend. They didn't listen. Regardless of the other circumstances around it, it happened and it's horrible. But you can't pin the blame on just one person here. And this guy did. And, you know, when you said he didn't feel better after killing this guy, well, I don't know that unless you're a psychopath, you would feel better taking a life.
Well, not just that, Michelle. Can you imagine how Peter Nielsen must have felt after knowing that it was down to him that these people all died? Children, you know?
Yeah, I know.
Horrific. That's on his soul for the rest of his life, which was short 2 years later. Koloyev said, even in the Swiss jail, nobody ever condemned me or reproached me. So it sounds like, Michelle, he believes, or, you know, it's judging by the response as well. Everyone's kind of behind him. They wanted to pin this on Nielsen.
I think no one went near him because they were scared he'd have a fucking shiv and stab them because he's stabbed a Swiss person to death. No one's going to go near that guy.
A Danish person.
It's not because they are behind him.
So he goes on to say, after the first 2 years in prison, I got into the medium security jail where I could communicate with other convicts. And when I went out for a walk into the prison yard for the first time, almost everybody there came up to me to express their respect for what I did. Life is more complicated than the law. I can only speak for myself. I had exhausted all legal ways to find justice. I believe any person in such a situation gets the right to be the law and perform justice. Oh, I don't know how I feel about this.
This guy is deluded. I don't believe anyone in the prison came up to him and went, respect, dude. I just can't believe this. I think he is in La La Land because he's so full of grief. He has created his own narrative about every fucking thing here, is my take.
You think?
Maybe.
Right. Well, when he retired in 2016, Koloyev was awarded the Glory of Ossetia, or Ossetia. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's a medal which is awarded to citizens who have improved the living conditions of the inhabitants of the region, educated the younger generation, and maintained law and order. So if he's delusional, he's also being validated.
Well, he's being enabled by a town who lost their children. So I think the town is also deluded. This is my take. Maybe I'm deluded.
In addition to the Schwarzenegger film Aftermath, if you do want to go on and watch something absolutely harrowing, go for it. Because there's another Russian film that was made in 2018 called Unforgiven. And it stars Dmitry Nagayev. And it was based on the tragedy more so than Aftermath. So that is the absolutely harrowing and devastating story of an accident that took 71 lives and 72 if you include the air traffic controller 2 years later. Überlingen.
I also have a Russian plane crash story. But I'm going to preface this by saying when I first moved to London, I was with a guy who refused to have a TV.
I thought you were going to say refused to wash up, because that was another thing, wasn't
Well, there
it?
was that too, that guy who refused to eat anything except, you know, bun cake and Diet Coke. We never had a TV, but it was actually fine because this was 2002 and he was a developer geek and he had 3 huge screen kind of computer setup and very good BitTorrent skills. So we used to be able to watch whatever we wanted on the computer, and he was obsessed with a show called Air Crash Investigations.
My daughter and husband have been watching that recently, and that's why she was hankering after another plane crash show, and that's why she's now watching Lost.
Well, I binged it, and this was before binging was a thing. Basically, it is what you think it is. It's a documentary series that looks at air crashes, near crashes, hijackings, bombings, things that go wrong in the air.
God.
It's a Canadian TV series called MAYDAY in Canada, but it was rebranded as Air Emergency and Air Disasters in the US, and then rebranded again to be called Air Crash Investigation in the UK and everywhere else around the world, which is why I know it as Air Crash.
Let's just call it that.
I know. Why rebrand it into like 10 different names? Stupid. They did reenactments of what happened on the plane, and they used all the transcripts from the black box recordings. So, like I said, binged every season of it, and some of that shit is burned into my brain 20 years down the line. So I'm going to talk about one of the most intense episodes I saw. It was called Kid in the Cockpit.
Oh, no.
We're going back to March 23, 1994. And of course, I looked up the UK hits of March 1994 because I thought it was going to be juicy rather than, the US ones. But, Geordie, the number one song was a song called Dupe by Dupe.
I forgot that we do this. I could have done that for 2002.
Oh, well, you could have, but you bloody didn't.
So what's Dupe? I think I know this.
Well, I was like, what the fuck is that? I have no idea. So I did look it up. It's this Dutch happy hardcore dance music.
Yeah.
There's no singing.
I think I remember.
Next was The Sign by Ace of Base.
I saw the sign. We've talked about that before.
I know, because we're in 1994 for a different story. And look, I feel like I don't even want to go in order here because this month, October, was shit for music. But the good tracks were Girls and Boys by Blur at number 7. What a man, what a man, what a man. Salt and Pepper.
Is that Salt and Pepper? I don't
Oh,
think
no.
so.
Maybe that's a different one.
It was
What a
on
Man.
Vogue, wasn't it?
Maybe I got the song wrong. There is something called What a Man by Salt and Pepper.
That's a different song then.
Yes, you're right, because What a Man is like Beyonce or something. You're right.
It's on Vogue.
On Vogue. Okay, sorry, on Vogue. Another one at number 14. I had to bring it up, Geordie.
What?
Sleeping in My Car by Roxette, your favourite band.
Fuck off. Because we went to ABBA Voyage recently, there was a lot of talk about the other Swedish band, Roxette. I can't stand it. Why do you have to be proud of every Swedish band if you're Swedish? I'm not proud of Rolf Harris. I'm Australian.
AC/DC, kind of proud.
Sure.
But we don't have to be proud of everything. But I was thinking, 94, we're going to have Hole, we're going to have Oasis, we're going to have like the stuff that we know. Nothing. Anyway, back to Kid in the Cockpit. It's the evening of the 22nd of March. Did I say October before? I meant March.
Weird.
Aeroflot, flight 953. That's right, Aeroflot.
That's why we don't fly Aeroflot.
Oh, well, yes. It was a passenger flight. It took off from Sheremetyevo, probably said that wrong, International Airport in Moscow, Russia. It was going to Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong. The flight time was expected to be just over 13 and a half hours, which meant there were 3 pilots because that's how many you need by regulation to fly the plane safely.
3. I had 3 in my story. You looked shocked about that, but you've got 3 in yours.
I do, actually, because they need a bit of kip over that flight time.
That's right.
So the pilot in command was Andrei. That's his name. Andre. Yeah, I guess that's how you could say it. Andre. Andre is probably the right way. Viktorovich Danilov. He was 40. He had 9,500 hours of flying time. So he knew what he was doing.
Significant. Yep.
His first officer was Igor Vasilievich Piskarov.
Yeah.
Piskayov. He was 33. He had 5,800 flight hours. And then there was Relief Captain Yaroslav Vladimirovich Kudrinsky. Just remember Kudrinsky. He was 39. He had nearly 9,000 flying hours. So they are experienced pilots, right? Thing is, for Relief Captain Kudrinsky, it was the first time he was traveling on an international flight with his 2 teenage kids, Yana and Eldar. So he was super excited. Then there were 9 cabin crew members and 63 passengers. So the flight starts off as usual. The pilots go through all the pre-flight stuff. They check the technical logbook. There's no issues with the aircraft. So they board all the passengers and they take off on time from Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow.
Oh, my God.
I'm fucking terrible with the Russian. The plane climbs to 30,000 feet and it stays there for 27 minutes before the plane hits their cruising altitude of 34,000 feet. And everything is going smoothly for the first 4 hours of the flight. Then, at 26 minutes past midnight, it's time for the pilot in command to take a break, get some rest, have a little snooze. So he leaves the cockpit and Relief Captain Kudrinsky takes over as the main pilot while co-captain Piskaryov, that's what I'm going to have to say, Piskaryov, is first officer. So it's at this point that Relief Captain Kudrinsky gets his kids from the the aircraft and into the cockpit because
Oh, dear.
he wants to show off and be, big daddy.
Come and sit on Daddy's knee and let me show you how to... Oh, no, I'm not going to say the rest of that. It sounds wrong.
Geordie!
I didn't mean
He's
that.
not Santa, for God's sake.
No, I know. I didn't mean it to sound like that.
You've mentioned Rolf Harris. He wants to get them in the cockpit, give him a bit of a, thrill. That sounds terrible.
See, now it's all gone wrong. We don't mean it, people. I don't know how it just sounds so awful.
It does.
We're innocent.
We are innocent. But is this story? You decide. Because he trundles these kids up the plane, gets them into the cockpit. And like I said before, this is pre-9/11 when pilots could still do this shit. So having other people in the cockpit was nothing too out of the ordinary. Because, any old whoever could go in to the cockpit if the captain and the pilots were cool with it. So Captain Kudrinsky has his 2 kids in the cockpit with him. And, of course, they're looking around, poking around, having fun. Then at 43 minutes past midnight, Kudrinsky asks his daughter Yana, do you want to sit in the pilot's chair and fly the aircraft? Well, of course, she says, yeah, because why the fuck wouldn't you want to fly a plane when you have no idea how to fly a plane?
I wouldn't be happy about this.
Oh, no. He gets out of his pilot seat, and this is actually against regulations. He lets Yana jump in. Thing is, Kudrinsky has the plane on autopilot, so he's not worried at all. So he says to his daughter...
So it's a moot point.
It's moot. So he says, grab the control wheel. You're going to fly the plane. And then he switches the autopilot mode from navigation, which is the mode that follows the pre-programmed route, to heading, which apparently lets him set the course. So he moves the dial more than 15 degrees, which initiates a 20-degree bank turn to the left.
So she could feel the plane moving.
Yeah, and because she has her hands on the control, she feels like she's making the turn, even though he has all the control of the aircraft, right? And she's loving it. But then, he makes some more adjustments, brings the plane back onto the original course. Boom, all done. No harm. No harm done. Now, during this maneuver, Yana has only kind of rested her hands on the controls and sort of, lightly kind of moved things, hasn't applied any pressure to it at all. But then a few minutes later at 00:51, Yana's brother Eldar, he wants to go. He's like, come on, my turn. So he jumps into the pilot's seat and he is loving pretending that he's flying the plane. But unlike his sister, he is going hard on that control wheel like he's a fucking rally driver, even though it's in autopilot mode. And just under 4 minutes later, it seems that unbeknownst to anyone in the cockpit, that little dickhead Eldar has applied enough force to the control column while he's fanging around on that steering wheel to contradict the autopilot for more than 30 seconds.
Holy shit.
Yep. So this means the flight computer is automatically switched over.
Oh, it's like when you try and unlock your steering wheel. If you jiggle it around, then it unlocks.
Exactly.
God.
So he's switched over the plane's ailerons to manual. And I didn't know what an aileron was, so I looked it up. It's the hinged bits on the wings that controls turning the aircraft. So, when you see when, you're coming into land, if you're sitting over the wing, and the little
come up.
Flaps fly up, that's what he is now in control of, unbeknownst to anyone. So to be clear, the plane is still in autopilot for all the flight systems, although now, because this kid Eldar was fucking around on that steering wheel, unbeknownst to anyone, he is now in control of turning the plane.
Oh, God.
So apparently a silent indicator light did come on to alert the pilots to this partial...
Why would it be silent?
Well, that's it. Silent. And that's the thing, it alerts them to the disengagement of that part of the controls. But these pilots who had only previously flown Soviet-designed planes that had audible warning signals, not visual warning signals, well, they did not notice this silent indicator light had come on. So they were absolutely oblivious to the fact that this kid was partially in control of this plane.
Jesus.
it seems that Eldar was the first person to notice that something wasn't right when he realized the plane was banking right. And, I guess in tune with him kind of steering that control wheel. And then moments after he did that, the flight path indicator changed to show the new flight path of the aircraft as it turned. And because the turn was continuous, the plane's predicted flight path was shown on the screen as a 180 turn. Now, apparently, this is a shape similar to what's shown when a plane is in a holding pattern, where a 180 turn is needed for the plane to remain in a stable position. So now the pilots are like, what the fuck? And they are confused. And this confused them as to what the hell's going on for 9 seconds. Now, during those 9 seconds, when they were trying to figure out...
My blood's run cold, by the way.
In 9 seconds, the plane banked past a 45-degree angle to almost 90 degrees, which is way steeper than the plane's design is allowed to do. So the plane was an A310, and because it's not designed to turn this steeply while maintaining altitude...
It fell.
Geordie, don't be sick when I say this. The plane started to drop fast. And honestly, Geordie, I cannot imagine what those pilots, let alone the crew and the passengers, must have been feeling.
On the ceiling.
Yep, because in 9 seconds, that plane dropped like a dead duck. And like you just said, apparently the increased G-forces on the pilots and crew and the passengers made regaining control of that plane fucking hard, meaning they were on the verge of fucked. So the autopilot system, which we know did not control the ailerons at this point, well, it's kind of smart, and it used its other controls to compensate for the sudden drop, and it began pitching the nose of the plane up and increasing thrust. But the plane couldn't handle it, and it began to stall. So because it's stalling, the autopilot system freaked out with all these conflicting demands, and it just disengaged entirely.
Oh, my God.
At the same time, the autopilot display screen went blank. Nothing on that screen. So at this point, there was an automatic system, another one, that kicked in. And what it did to recover from the stall was to lower the nose, which put the plane into a nosedive.
Oh, fuck off.
And while this is fucking terrifying, what this did was actually reduce the G-forces, which allowed Kudrinsky to get back in that fucking pilot seat, right?
Okay.
So Piskaryov, as the first officer, he was trying his best to get them out of this shit, and he managed to pull out of the nosedive. But
wow,
he overcorrected and put the plane into an almost vertical upwards ascent.
Oh, for God's sake.
And this again caused the plane to freak the fuck out and stall again, which then caused it to enter a spin. Geordie, while I was reading this, it reminded me of when I was in Australia and I went to this amusement arcade with my sister and her kids. And I went on this motorbike simulation game where you get to race against your friends. And I was going hard on the steering wheel of that game. I was overturning. I was sending that bike shooting upwards. I was doing spins. I was going backwards. And I felt really helpless on this game because I could not get this motorbike back in control. And I was kind of doing small movements as well. And everything just seemed to send this bike flying. And of course I came last. But I just had a little feeling of how that plane must have been for those pilots. They were probably flipping from side to side. They were going to a nosedive. They were plunging downwards. They were flipping up. They were going directly up. They were stalling. They were going into a spin. And I thought, for those pilots, that is the most horrific arcade game you can ever imagine because it's real.
Yeah.
And I imagine everyone on that plane at this point must have been tightening their seat buckle, getting into the brace position and saying their goodbyes because it must have felt terrifying to be on that plane. Yeah. Although, during this horrific spin, Kudrinsky did manage to almost recover the plane, but...
You keep doing this to us, Michelle.
I'm sorry.
It's like, oh my God, they're going to make it. But...
he pulled the yoke too aggressively, which caused the speed of the plane to drop, which then triggered a rudder input to then send the plane into a second spin.
Fucking hell.
Problem was, this time it was a flat spin. Now, I looked up what a flat spin meant. Yeah, and basically, of all the spins that a plane can go into, the flat spin is the most threatening and hardest to recover from, because an airplane in a flat spin has practically no forward airspeed. And worst of all, its normal flight controls have pretty much no effect.
Right.
So you're effectively fucked when you're in a flat spin.
Okay.
But Geordie, by some miracle,
What?
Kudrinsky and Piskarov managed to regain control of the plane and somehow managed to level the wings out.
Oh my gosh.
But
Oh, Michelle.
I'm sorry. But the problem was, at this point, they had absolutely no idea how far they had descended with all the drops and nosedives and everything else.
Where's their traffic control?
Exactly. Well, look, at this stage, the altitude of the plane was too low to recover from, and at 12:58 a.m., the plane crashed into the Kuznetsk Alatau mountain range in Kemerovo Oblast, and it killed all 63 passengers and 12 crew members on board.
Oh no.
So, from the time Kudrinsky's kids got in that cockpit and started pretending to fly the plane, the whole thing crashing into a Russian mountain range was 16 minutes. That's
Wow.
all it took to fuck
But
up
they
that
were
plane.
Up, down, all around. The passengers must have been just going through hell. That's awful.
Well, I've got a little bit on that. But the interesting thing was, thank God all 75 people on board were killed on impact.
Yeah.
Interestingly, no distress calls were made before the crash.
They thought they could handle it.
Well, I think it's because one of them wasn't even in the fucking pilot
Oh,
seat.
really?
Kudrinsky was out. The kid was in the cockpit.
Yeah.
He was in the seat. And I think the other one was still trying to figure out what was going on before the G-forces meant they could do nothing.
Yeah.
So I think then they were just like, fuck, we've just got to get into action mode. Now, apparently the plane crashed with its landing gear up. And I read that all the passengers were prepared for emergency because recovery crews reported that all the passengers were found strapped into their seats.
Okay.
And all of this info came from the black box, which was found, obviously,
Yeah.
and which is why there's such detailed info on what happened that day. But the really sad thing is, and a little bit like your story, despite both pilots working brilliantly to save that aircraft, investigations later concluded that if the pilots had simply let go of the yoke after the first spin,
Yeah.
aerodynamic principles would have caused the plane to level out and return to normal flying, which meant the plane would not have crashed.
It would have righted itself.
Yep.
Oh.
However, thinking about human nature and the panic those pilots must have felt as the plane was going down, of course their instinct must have been to do whatever they could to save the plane.
Yes.
So they were just trying everything.
Overcompensating.
But it actually made things worse, and they already were. But how do you know unless you've been in that situation before? And of course, they hadn't. So the other sad thing about this case is that
Sad enough.
also, I know, the investigations also found that there was no evidence of any kind of technical failure in the plane. It was all
perfectly
human
fine.
error because of those little bastards in the cockpit. So,
Oh, that's terrible. And obviously,
know.
cockpits are now locked.
I know. But when news of this air disaster made headlines all around the world, Aeroflot originally denied that there were any kids in the cockpit during the crash.
Really?
But they eventually did fess up when a Moscow-based magazine called Obozrevatel,
Ah, well done.
I know, well, they published a transcript of the cockpit voice recording in September 94. So just, 6 months later. And it showed that there were kids at the wheel and that the pilots almost saved the plane, but it all went tits up and obviously no one survived. So for me, I think the reason why this story has really stuck with me for all these years is because it was just so avoidable. And so many small things went wrong so quickly without anyone realizing in time. And, you know, how the efforts of the pilots who really tried hard to save that plane and all the passengers and themselves actually set them further on the flight path to fucked. So it's just horrific. And obviously, like you just said, no one these days is allowed in the cockpit. So it would not happen now, but such an unnecessary crash, all because that pilot wanted to show off a bit to his kids. What a disaster.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
That was quite a ride, Michelle. You actually had me on the edge of my little plastic tub chair.
Really?
Yes. Gripping my hands and blood running cold, everything. I hate to talk about these kind of things because I don't like the idea of it in my mind when I'm in an aeroplane. And sometimes I'm in an aeroplane for 24 hours in a stretch, or, 12 hours a stretch.
I'm always in fucking planes. I'm flying a lot, and I have.
La-di-da.
For my entire adult life, I've been in planes a lot. But you can't be scared about these things. You just have to live life, get on those planes, enjoy wherever you're going, and just think.
And hope to God that it's not bring your kid to work day.
Exactly. And just hope that, people know what they're doing up there in the skies. Because I tell you, there are about 5 other air crash investigations from when I binged that series 20 years ago that have haunted my dreams. And maybe in the future, we will revisit.
Good times. It's a good time. Good time was had by all. Gosh, well, I hope none of our eavesdroppers have any flights planned in the coming weeks, months, etc.
And if you do, just make sure you book the good meal. I find the Hindu vegetarian is the best option.
Okay. I always go for the Malaysian.
Oh, that's also good.
Because the eggs look like rubber. And strap yourself in.
Strap yourself in because we've got 3 things left to say.
Wherever you are.
Whatever you do.
Just keep
eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping.